everyone, how are you for today? I hope you are always happy and healthy. So for the first, let me introduce my name. My name is Tasya Septini Simanjuntak with NIM 191C01. So for this video, I wanna do my assessment about Project 1 in my English class. So in my assessment, I wanna choose the grammar of adverb of frequency. So I want to explain the grammar of adverb of frequency. Okay, let's get started with me. Adverb of frequency. Adverb of frequency are adverbs that indicate how often an action or event occurs. Common examples include always, usually, often, sometimes, rarely, never, and etc. This adverb helps provide context about the frequency of the activity in the sentence, so that the listener or reader can understand the pattern or habit in question. An adverb of frequency can be divided into two, namely, for the first, definite adverb of frequency. This adverb indicates a measurable and specific frequency, such as every day, once a week, and twice a month. And the second is indefinite adverb of frequency. This adverb gives a general description without specifying a specific type, such as always, usually, and sometimes. So for the example of adverb of frequency, for the first is always. In the context of use always, function as an adverb that indicates the frequency of an action or state that occurs consistently or without exception. For the example of always is, for the first, she always drinks a glass of milk in the morning. And the second example is, he always gives candies to me. The second example of adverb of frequency is usually. Definition of usually. Usually refers to a habit that happens regularly, though not always consistently. It implies that something happens most of the time, but does not guarantee that it will always happen. Percentage of usually. In the context of frequency, usually can be interpreted as about 90% of the time. For the example is, I usually go to supermarket with him. The third of example of adverb of frequency is frequently. The word frequently is an English adverb of frequency used to indicate how often an action or event occurs and indicates that an activity is performed with a high degree of regularity but not all the time. And the example is, she frequently brings fruit into the classroom. And the second example is, she frequently goes to the gym. Next is the often. Often describes a frequency 70%, indicating that an action occurs several times in a given period, such as in a week or a month. And for example is, we often go shopping at the mall. And the second example is, we often follow the English class. Next, this is have sometimes. There are sometimes. Sometimes describe a frequency that indicates that something happens or certain times, but not regularly. In the it indicates then the action is performed with uncertainty in the terms of timing. For the example is, I sometimes go jogging in the morning. And the second example is, sometimes I like to read a book before bed. Next is occasionally. Next is occasionally. Next is occasionally. Occasionally describes a frequency that indicates that something happens at certain times but not regularly. It indicates that the action is done at least frequent interval compared to words like often or sometimes. For the example is, I occasionally go to the cinema. And the second example is, she occasionally travels for work. Next is rarely. Rarely, this word is used to indicate that an action or event occurs with very low frequency, almost never, but is still possible in certain contexts. For the example is, I rarely go to the office. And the second example is, she rarely eats fast food. Next is seldom. This word is used to indicate that an action or event occurs with very low frequency, almost never, but it's still possible in certain contexts. For the example is, I seldom eat out. And the second example is, he seldom goes to the gym. Next is hardly ever. Hardly ever describes a frequency that indicates that something hardly happens at all. It emphasizes the unpredictability or rarity of the action. For the example is, I hardly ever go to the beach. And the second example is, he hardly ever eats out. Next, or the last is never. Never describes a frequency that indicates that something never happened in a certain context. It emphasizes that the action was simply not performed. The The example is, I never eat meat. She never goes, and the second example is, she never goes to bed late. And this is the example conversation of adverb of frequency. And this is a conversation of two person, yes, like and like what is this? Rina, Eddie and Rina. The conversation of Eddie and Rina, but the conversation is used adverb of frequency. Uh, this is Eddie. Eddie, I usually play badminton on weekends. How about you, Rina? I often play on weekdays after school. Eddie, that's cool. Do you ever play in the morning, Rina? I sometimes play in the morning if I have time, but I rarely get up early for it. Eddie, it's the same here. I never play before noon. Rina, let's play together sometime. Eddie, that sounds good. I'm always ready to play. So at in this conversation, have adverb of frequency. Yes, have adverb of frequency. In this, usually, often, sometimes, rarely, never, uh, sometimes, and always. This conversation is used adverb of frequency. Yes. Okay, next. And the last is Conclusion. Overall, adverb of frequency help in describing how often an action is performed, provides a clear time context, and makes sentence more specific in terms of habits. Uh, and in adverb of frequency, is the meaning have frequency from 100% until 10%. And I think it's enough for today. I'm sorry for all my mistake, and I'm gonna say thank you for watching my video, and I will sweet. Bye bye.